Hello, dear students. Let's continue with the art of the start 2.0. The time test, battle hardened, guide for anyone starting anything. The art of leading. Be driven not by your importance, but by the work that you're trying to do. And here, my friends, we're trying to do positive and value added jobs and activities and startups. So let's begin with the art of leading 2.0, which is a brief content but pretty important in order for us to gain some quality skills. 2. Entrepreneurship. Exude optimism. Above all, leaders cannot have a bad day, no matter how scared or depressed you are. You cannot show fear, uncertainty, or doubt. You must exude optimism every day. I cannot remember a time when Steve Jobs looked beaten. This isn't to say that you should not recognize issues and challenges. If you don't, you're clueless, and this is even worse than pessimism. However, I cannot remember a time when Steve Jobs looked beaten. I saw anger, frustration, and even semi-delusional ranting, but never defeat. When you have episodes of pessimism and doubt, discuss your issues with people who are from trust, spouse, colleagues outside the startup, or a friend, somebody which is your confidant, or if all else fails, talk to your mother. But don't do this with employees. They must always believe that you believe. Establish a culture of execution. Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. And we are in difficult times. So, with this type of skills, we can gain the strengths to endure it. As a leader of the organization or your startup, you are responsible for results. And results are the product of a culture of execution. This means that everyone delivers on their promises, unless there are unforeseen circumstances. Not everyone will succeed in doing so, but the corporate expectation is ultimately achieving goals, not missing them. Here's how to establish this culture. 1. Set and communicate goals. The simple act of setting goals and communicating them increases the likelihood that your startup will achieve them. It gets everyone on the same page and provides a day-to-day guide for what employees need to do. This applies to every task: finalizing specifications, building a prototype, signing up early customers, shipping, collecting, recruiting, finishing, marketing materials. The list is pretty long. 2. Measure progress. Goals only work if you measure progress in achieving them. As the old saying goes, what gets measured gets done. This also means you'd better pick the right goal to begin with, or the wrong things will get done. In a startup, you should measure the report results every week. As your startup matures and uncertainties in your technology, market, and people decline, you can shift to a monthly schedule. 3. Establish a single point of accountability. If it takes more than 10 seconds to figure out who is responsible for achieving a goal, something is wrong. And later in class, we will see a whole model on accountability, which I think is a pretty important entrepreneurial skill. Good people accept accountability. Great people ask for it. For the good of your entire organization, establish it. A person who knows he is being measured and held accountable is highly motivated to succeed. 4. Be part of the solution. As a leader, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. This means that you're either establishing a culture of execution or you are establishing a culture of undisciplined, unjustified optimism, which is also toxic. Your job is to be the adult. Set the example and deliver what you promise to. Reward achievers. The people you reward in a startup are the ones who deliver. You can use options, money, public praise, days off, or free lunches. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that you recognize achievers, not the people who are along for the ride. Follow through until an issue is solved or no longer relevant. We all like to work on the newest, hottest stuff. It's human nature. Who wouldn't rather be involved with the next breakthrough product instead of fixing the current one? Don't stop paying attention to a project because it gets boring. Fixing bugs is tedium to you, but it's not to the customer who recently bought your product. Take the red pill. This is your last chance, Neo. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Morpheus from the Matrix. Neo chooses the red pill, which brings him face to face with the harsh realities of this world. If he had taken the blue pill, he could have lived in the comfortable fantasy of the Matrix. Leaders face the same choice: reality or fantasy. If you want to succeed, take the red pill and determine how deep the rabbit hole goes. If you are serious about staying in touch with reality, these are the 10 most important questions you can ask. What is our top priority? When will we ship? When will we run out of money if we don't ship? How much does it cost to acquire a customer? What is our true, fully loaded cost of operations? Whom do we compete with? What can our competition do that we can't? Who are our non-performing employees? What can we beg, borrow, or list that are we buying? How good am I as a leader? Get a Morpheus. Every drug, even the truth, needs a delivery system. In The Matrix, it was Morpheus, the character played by Lawrence Fishburne, who delivered the truth. The question is, who is Morpheus in your organization? If you don't have one, you need to get one. Morpheus should have at least 10 years of operating experience and a background in finance, operations, or accounting. This position requires knowledge of the real world operation of an organization. The role isn't naysayer, but realist. A background as a consultant, auditor, banker, journalist, or analyst is a bad idea because advising and analyzing are easy, but implementing is hard. The single best question to determine if a person's background is adequate is: have you ever fired or laid off someone? If the answer is no, keep looking. The person is the yang to the CEO's yin. The CEO decides what, while the Morpheus asks what could go wrong. This relationship is not an opposition but a counterbalance. During different phases of your development and for different tasks, you may need a different type of Morpheus. A research and development Morpheus to tell you what you're creating is flawed. An operation Morpheus to tell you that your systems can be handled the volume of business. A finance Morpheus to tell you that you're spending too much or too little money. An ethics Morpheus to tell you that you're calculating the wrong values. Many people in a startup are in denial about something. Some denial is good, for example, denying that the experts are right when they say you can succeed. The reason you need a Morpheus is to ensure that you realize that you're in denial, just in case the denial is damaging the organization. Get a devil's advocate. From 1587 to 1993, the Catholic Church appointed certain individuals to argue against the canonization or sainthood of a particular candidate. The Advocatus Diaboli, or Devil's Advocate, role was created as far a way to find faults in candidates to ensure saintly saints. When the practice ended in 1983, after the election of Pope John Paul II in 1978, an explosion in canonization occurred. Specifically, the Church canonized 500 people during the reign of John Paul II. It had canonized only 98 people during the reign of all John Paul II's 20th century predecessors. A Morpheus and a devil's advocate are not the same thing. A Morpheus tells you the truth, good or bad. A devil's advocate tells you what's bad even if he doesn't believe it himself. The existence of this role is a positive statement because it shows that criticism is acceptable and that management is open to contrarian perspectives. Also, a devil's advocate fosters internal communication because he becomes a person that disenchanted employees can contact. Devil's advocacy isn't necessary on every decision, just strategic ones. Hire better than yourself. Steve Jobs had a saying that A players hire A players, B players hire C players, and C players hire D players. Using his logic, it doesn't take long to get to C players, and then you wind up with what's called the bozo explosion. Thus, great hires should not only be better than the CEO and management team, they should also differ from them. I refine Steve's concept to A players hire A plus players. If there is one thing a CEO must do, It's hire managers that are better than he or she is. If there is one thing managers must do, it's hire employees who are better than they are. For this to happen, the CEO and management team must possess three qualities: the humility to admit that people can perform a function better than they can, the ability to discern which people are A plus or A players, the self confidence to recruit these better than me people. Many entrepreneurs don't realize this, but startups need three kinds of A plus players, depending on the stage of the organization. Kamikazes who are willing to work 8 hours a week to launch. Implementers who came in after the kamikazes and create infrastructure. Operators who are happy to run an ongoing system. Those great hires should not only be better than the CEO and management team, they should also differ from them. Startups need people with diverse skills that complement, not overlap each other. If you're an engineer, imagine a startup filled with engineers who are not as good as you. The guarantees crappy products. Imagine a startup where the CEO is a better salesperson than the vice president of sales, a better marketing person than the vice president of marketing, and a better finance person than the chief financial officer. This guarantees mediocrity. Make people better. It's easy to recommend that you hire A or A plus players by using an example like the Macintosh division of Apple. But that was hardly startup. I would not back down from stressing and desirability of hiring A and A plus players. But I realized that a startup may not always be able to woo such people. Then what? The answer is not to pray for funding so that you can hire proven players. This will take too long, and management usually precedes funding as opposed to catalyzing it. The answer is that you're hiring minimum viable people, MVPs, who can do the job that needs doing. The concept is the same as Eric Ries's MVP, minimum viable product. If you wait until you have the perfect product or person, it may be too late. So you hire minimum viable people, and much like improving your minimum viable product, you improve your minimum viable employee. Think about this. No one came out of the womb as an A or an A plus player. Everyone started somewhere. So grow your own. Consider who began their careers and as interns. Betsy Johnson from Mademoiselle, Oprah Winfrey from WLAC TV Nashville, Steven Spielberg at Universal Studios. Not everyone will ultimately become a Johnson, Winfrey, Spielberg, A or A plus player, but one of the key tasks of the art of leading is giving people a chance and make employees better. Focus on strengths. Hiring better than yourself means that you hire for strengths as opposed to hiring on the basis of the lack of weaknesses. A great leader hires people for their strengths and then assigns them tasks that take advantage of those strengths. And she hires people with other strengths to provide training and assistance to address the weakness of other employees. This enables them to do their best work as opposed to just getting by without exposing those weaknesses. Your most important consideration is to distinguish between individual contribution and ability to manage others. That is, you may decide to hire an engineer who is great at programming or a salesperson who is great at selling, but neither of whom can manage. This is okay as long as you don't put such people into management positions. The usual assumption is that over time, people should move into management and provide less individual contribution. This is a bad assumption. Many people should remain individual contributors, where their strengths lie, while some great individual contributors can and should make that transition to management. Address your shortcomings first. Good leaders address their shortcomings first before they criticize others. Perhaps your deficiencies were responsible for the shortcomings of those who work for you. There's a saying that if a manager has to fire someone, maybe the company should fire him too, because the situation should not have gotten to that point. This means you start reviewing by saying, I could have provided you with better management. People who adopt this self-criticism strategy will improve as managers because they will take responsibility for lousy outcomers. Just as important, they will inspire employees to improve too, because of the good example that they set. Note, the word is inspire, not scare. Poor leaders often judge their intentions against the result of others. I intended to meet my goals, but you actually missed yours. Somehow it's easier to excuse one's own shortcomings than to understand the shortcomings of others. You should reverse this outlook and judge yourself by what you've accomplished and judge others by what they intended. This means you are harsh on yourself than on others. Over the long run, you cannot continue to judge people by their intentions if they consistently produce lousy results. And in that case, you need to acknowledge what you made a hiring or training mistake. Don't ask employees to do what you won't do. One of my favorite television shows was Dirty Jobs. It starred Mike Rowe went around America doing dirty jobs such as taking out the trash, mixing paint in a factory, cleaning sewers, performing all kinds of distasteful works on farms. Rowe illustrates a key concept of leadership. Never ask people to do something that you wouldn't do. This assumes that you're not a masochistic nutcase, but within responsible limits, it brings you closer to employees and reduces any feelings of us versus them. Celebrate success. One win can seem to overcome the pain of 100 losses. So celebrating the incremental success of an organization is a powerful way to motivate employees, particularly if you emphasize team wins rather than the individual ones. According to Brenda Benz, author of How You Are Like a Shampoo, celebrating success can have these positive effects. Motivate your employees to work even harder. Unifies the team around common goals. Uplifts employees. Mindsets from ongoing tasks to a celebration. Communicates the kind of goals that organization values. Builds momentum by illustrating that progress is happening. Reminds them that they work for a winning organization. A cautionary word about celebrations. Good times tempt startups to throw blowout bashes at expensive hotels with famous entertainers. This practice is a waste of money and a bad message to employees. The operative words are fun and cool, not extravagant and awesome. For example, the Industrial Extension Service of North Carolina State University celebrated its success at creating 1 billion of economic value by conducting a statewide bus tour of manufacturing companies. At each stop of the manufacturing makes its real tour, and CSU people collected samples of products from the manufacturers and delivered the samples to the governor of the state. It was fun for the North Carolina state employees as well as rewarding for the employees of all companies that the boss visits. This is an example of good celebration. Pick the right quadrant. Bob Sutton is a professor at Stanford University and author of Good Boss, Bad Boss: How to Be the Best and Learn from the Worst. He compiled a list of the 12 beliefs of good bosses. Think of it as a good boss manifesto. 1. Have a flawed and incomplete understanding of what it feels like to work for me. I strive to be confident enough to convince people that I am in charge, but humble enough to realize that I am often going to be wrong. 2. My success and that of my people depends largely on being the master of obvious and mundane things, not on magical, obscure, or breakthrough ideas or methods. 3. Having ambitious and well defined goals is important, but it is useless to think about them much. My job is to focus on the small wins that enable my people to make a little progress every day. 4. One of the most important and most difficult parts of my job is to strike the delicate balance between being too assertive and not assertive enough. 5. My job is to serve as a human shield to protect my people from internal and external intrusions, distractions, and idiocracy of every stripe, and to avoid imposing my own idiocy on them as well. 6. I strive to be confident enough to convince people that I am in charge, but humble enough to realize that I am often going to be wrong, as we just said. 7. I aim to fight as if I'm right, and listen as if I'm wrong, and to teach my people to do the same thing. 8. One of the best tests of my leadership and my organization is what happens after people make a mistake. 9. Innovation is crucial to every team and organization, so my job is to encourage my people to generate and test all kinds of new ideas. But it is also my job to help them kill off all the bad ideas we generate, and most of the good ideas too. 10. Bad is stronger than good. It is more important to eliminate the negative than to accentuate the positive. 11. How I do things is as important as what I do. 12. Because I wield power over others, I am at great risk of acting like an insensitive jerk and not realizing it. Change your mind. At the introduction of the first iPhone in June 2007, Jobs announced our innovative approach using the Web 2.0 based standards lets developers create amazing new applications while keeping the iPhone secure and reliable. Translation: Apple would not permit apps on the iPhone. The only way to add functionality was through Safari. the iPhone browser plugin software. Apple did this to keep iPhones secure and reliable. 11 months later, this was a headline of an Apple press release. Apple executives to showcase Mac OS X, Leopard, and OS X iPhone development platforms at WWDC 2008 keynote. Translation: Apple now wanted programmers to create applications for iPhones. The desired outcome was, there's an app for that. Many people consider this kind of reversal a sign of cluelessness or weakness. Changing the policy meant that Apple wasn't wrong and didn't know what, what it was doing. Following this line of reasoning, leaders should not change their minds, or at least hide the fact if they do. Nothing is further from the truth. When leaders publicly change their minds, it shows that they're smart enough to realize that they made a mistake, secure enough to admit the mistake, and willing to risk their reputation to do the right thing. All these outcomes are good. So change your mind and disclose that you did. Think of the issue in this way. If you're running a startup and can't change your mind quickly, when will you ever? As you get bigger, it's only going to get harder to do so. Tell employees that they're wanted. According to Michael Lopp, author of Managing Humans, Biting and Humorous Tales of a Software Engineering Manager, the three most important words during the recruitment process are, "We want you." This means that it's your job to remind candidates that your startup wants them and that they are the best people for the job. When many people are unemployed, you may think that it's a buyer's market, so therefore this attitude isn't necessary. You are wrong, because when it comes to great people, it's always a seller's market, always. Once you've decided to hire someone, turn on the charm, communicate that you want her, invite her to come by the office, have other employees take her out for drinks and ask her for input. The most dangerous time in the hiring process is after someone has given notice at her previous organization and hasn't yet started at yours. It's then that she receives a counteroffer and other forms of persuasion to remain in that old job. If the other organization doesn't make this effort, you should worry that you may have hired an inferior person. You haven't really hired a new employee until she shows up on the first day, but even then you shouldn't relax. Imagine that an organization hired a great employee away from you. When would you stop trying to change her mind? I wouldn't give up until she'd been on the new job for 30 days. Say this. The last leadership tip is to encourage you to incorporate the following four phrases into your conversation with employees, customers, investors, and partners, your key stakeholders. The better the leader, the more she doesn't hesitate to use these phrases. I don't know, thank you, do what you think is right, it's my fault. I'm not going to claim that some of the most heralded and wealthy leaders ever uttered these phrases, but they were probably exceptions who defied many good practices. I am not convinced that one has to be an asshole to succeed. Said this, my fellow students, I hope that this short chapter was of interest. Please review it and proceed to your weekly activity, which is going to be about leadership. Any questions? Please feel free to contact me via email. will be glad to assist you in your entrepreneurship skills path. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.